Alright guys, so as you saw, we got Frankenstein running. I was able to put it in gear while it was up on the jack stands and let the clutch out in first gear, and the wheels were turning, so that tells me that the transmission is working properly. And looking underneath the car, I didn't see any leaks, so that means that the axle seals that I replaced, the main seal, the oil pan gasket, and when we crack the transmission apart and put it back together, that means nothing is leaking. So that is great, because it was leaking from just about everywhere before. So in the opening clip, I still had the exhaust off of the car. The exhaust was off because when I changed the oil pan gasket, I had to remove it. Since then, I put the exhaust back, so it's all back together the way it should be. But anyway, I finally got a day off of work. We're past the busy time, so I want to get Frankenstein driving today if possible. So what that means is I'm going to have to basically bleed the brakes, and that's really the only thing keeping it off of the street. Obviously it's not fully together yet. I mean, I still have to put the front bumper on and all that stuff. I don't want to do too much of that stuff before knowing that everything works first. So I think I'm going to get the brakes bled today, get it lowered to the ground, and possibly just drive it around the driveway a little bit just to make sure that everything's functioning the way it should. Pull it back into the garage, inspect it for leaks again, and if it's not leaking, then I think we can go ahead and put the rest of the car back together. So should be a very productive weekend. I'm hoping to get a lot done, and hopefully we can get Frankenstein basically ready for the track. That's kind of what my goal is. So let's get started. So I'm just taking all the wheels off here. These are the ASA wheels that I was running last year for daily driving. They're a 14-inch, and as you can see, there is not a whole lot of clearance between the wheel and the brake, and so little in fact that the wheel weights that I had on the inside were hitting the brake caliper. I've had the wheels rebalanced and have the weights in different spots, but I still don't like how little clearance there is there. So I may end up running these wheels that I have. These came off of the 94 Prelude that we picked up last year. I might give those a try. I'm gonna have a lot more clearance with the brakes, and yeah, we'll just see how it looks. Maybe let me know in the comments what you think. These are a 16-inch Koenig Ultra Racing wheel, so they don't look too bad. I'm not too crazy about the color. But I do have a bronze Plastidip wheel kit that I might use. I kind of hate using Plastidip, but it's a kit that I have, and I might as well use it since I have it. So we'll see what happens. But like I said, let me know in the comments below what you guys think, and I'm going to get these wheels off of here. First thing I want to do is make sure that all the lines are tight on the brake calipers before I start adding any fluid to it. So I'm going to take all the wheels off and start with that.
A few moments later.
So I also forgot that I have to install the rear brake pads, so I got those done quickly. I just quickly banged them out. They're basically just an OEM replacement. They're still from Power Stops, so I think they're a pretty good quality brake pad. If you have a look at the old ones, you can see there's still a lot of material left on them, but they were in really rough shape. Like, there was chunks taken out of them, so I don't know how they got that way. If the previous owner had heated them up pretty good and then put the parking brake on, then chunks of the brake pad would have stuck to the rotor and stuff like that. So I'm guessing that's probably what happened, or maybe they weren't broken in properly. I don't know, but it's got new pads on the rear now anyway, so I don't have to worry about that. I have started bleeding the brakes. I've bled them twice already. The first time I bled the brakes, it still felt like there was a lot of air in the lines. And when I had the brake pedal pushed to the floor, I didn't even have any pressure on the front calipers. So I bled them a second time, and a lot more air came out, and they're feeling pretty good now, but I want to bleed them one more time just to be sure. So basically what I'm doing is I've been starting with the passenger rear, and then I move on to the driver rear. I do the passenger front, and then I do the driver front. And the reason being is I want to do the brakes that are farthest away from the reservoir first. So if you see the reservoir is here, I'm going to start at that side first, then this one, then get closer and closer to the reservoir, and then finish off with this one. So that seems to be working out for me pretty good. The first time I bled them, like I said, there was still lots of air in the lines, and I think that was because I disconnected both fronts completely, and there was a lot of air getting in there. So when I bled the rears, there was still a lot of fluid left in the lines, so it felt like they were good, and then I got all the air out of the front, but I guess when I was bleeding the front, air got into the rear again, so I did the whole process over again. So I think they're feeling pretty good, but I do want to do it one last time just to be sure, and then I think I'm pretty much ready to get this thing out for a test drive. So let's quickly get these bled. It's not going to be too interesting, so I'm just going to quickly bang it out, and we'll get this thing back together. Alright, so I'm on the last brake caliper now for bleeding, and I'm using this one-man brake bleeding system, which actually works pretty good. So basically what you want to do is make sure that there's a little bit of brake fluid in here, and there's a hose that runs from the top to the bottom, and that way when you're pumping the brakes, it's not sucking in any air. And then you just hook it up to the bleeder valve like you normally would. So I've cracked this one open already, and I can see some of the fluid is now flowing through it. I don't see any air bubbles in there. My reservoir is fairly full, so I'm going to pump the brakes a few times, probably 5 or 6 times, and then I'm just going to check for any air bubbles in the lines, and then that's basically it. Alright, and having a good look at the lines here, it doesn't look like there's any bubbles in there, so I think we're good. Alright, so I'm done bleeding the brakes. They seem to be working pretty good now, so I'm going to slap the wheels on real quick, get Frankenstein lowered to the ground, and see if it fires up. Alright, so I got the car lowered to the ground now. I ended up having to use my regular jack instead of our low life jack because Tim is using it right now for his TL. So I just had to figure out a way to get the car lowered to the ground. Wasn't ideal, but it worked. So I'm going to try getting this thing started. It shouldn't be too bad because I had it running last week. And let's see if we can run this thing up and down the driveway a few times. I'd love to take it out on the street, but because I'm going to have to be braking, I won't be able to brake in the brakes properly without taking it on a full test drive. And the car has no insurance on it right now, so I don't want to let the brakes get too hot, otherwise they're not going to brake in properly. So just going to go up and down the driveway for now. Make sure that the transmission works like it should, and that there's no weird noises. That way, as long as I know that everything's working the way it should for the most part, then I can get on to putting everything back together. But that probably won't happen until next week, but for now, let's see if we can get this thing started. well, so far I would call that a success. I was able to drive it back and forth in the garage okay. I just wanted to get a feel for the clutch before I sent it out onto the driveway, and it actually worked okay. So took it out on the driveway, went up and down a few times, and I couldn't help myself. I did take it on the street, just a quick loop around. I was able to get it into 4th gear, no problem. So I know it's shifting properly, which is good, considering we had the trans apart and got it put back together. That means everything is working as it should. My only concern right now is the brakes. They still feel very spongy. I'm wondering if I'm gonna have to drive the car around a bit just to get them to self-adjust properly, and then maybe that'll help. But it seems like the brake pedal just sinks right to the floor. You could kind of tell when I was about to pull back into the garage, I just kind of went up and down a few times, and as I was going backwards, I would lightly step on the brake, and you could kind of hear the rubbing sound. And I don't know, it just feels like they're not performing the way that they should. So I'm gonna check again. I might have to bleed the brakes again. I might have to adjust the brake pedal. I'm not sure at this point what the problem is, but I don't feel very safe taking it on the street, let alone the track, with brakes like that. So I got to do a bit more thinking and a bit more work on them yet, but everything else seems to be working as it should, so I'm very happy with that. But that's kind of where this video is going to end today. I got to get to work cleaning up this garage because it is a mess, and Tim's actually coming out today. We are going to be working on his Civic all weekend, so we got to get that thing turned into a full-fledged race car. Right now it's just a bare shell, so we have less than a month to get that finished. So it's crunch time. We got to get started. So he's coming out tonight, and we're going to work on it all weekend, and hopefully we're going to get the engine swapped in it and get it running and driving at the very least. And we'll see how much further we get. But if you like the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. If you have any advice for me on maybe something else I need to do with these brakes, maybe there's something I'm missing, but let me know in the comments below, because I could use your help for sure. Your feedback is always welcome. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Make sure you get the word out for us. We're hoping to hit 1,000 subscribers soon, and we're getting pretty close, so any help is appreciated. And yeah, we will see you next time, guys.